Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. To start this off, I'm going to first say that I'm very well off financially, as I come from a really rich family as well as have multiple businesses that are building up my personal empire. I got into multiple relationships on and off as I was growing up and never really brought a girl back home to my parents or got emotionally attached to anyone, which probably explains why the first girl I ever introduced to my parents ended up horrifying and shocking them to the core. I guess there are many reasons to their reactions, and I'm not saying that it was acceptable that they rejected my relationship and outcasted my girlfriend, but knowing me, it was definitely shocking. The first girlfriend I ever had is a divorced woman that has a 13-year-old teenager and that has somewhat been struggling financially most of her life, which I'm not saying explains what my parents did, but I think it's important to preface this by saying that because it will have a lot of relevance to the story anyways. My mom and dad were very unaccepting of the extravagant trips and gifts and amount of money that I was spending on my newly found love and her daughter. I guess I'm just a kind of guy that would spend it to prove his love, but now looking back at it, flying out a 13-year-old to a new country every couple of months, even during a pandemic, does sound somewhat outrageous. This following story actually took place during one of those trips, only this wasn't to another country, but across states. My girlfriend refuses to stay at home or take any money from me, which means that she's constantly running around either working or trying to find better jobs and opportunities, which is one of the many reasons I am so head over heels for her, and it also means that she doesn't get to come with us on the trips most of the time. As I was saying, on our latest trip, just me and Laura, not her actual name, we ended up going to one of my family's spas that happened to be right near a water park, so our destination contained everything we could need to make sure this trip would appeal to an angsty teenager. Laura is one of those kids that's very secluded and keeps everything to herself and her emotions locked, especially since her parents divorced. I've always tried to dissolve that, not by attempting to replace her father, but by trying to be as much of an appropriately needed fatherly figure as she could need. When we got to our destination and spent the first couple of days rather lavishly and comfortably, I thought I was doing a great job, and I was. That is, of course, until my parents got involved and derailed the entirety of the events that took place afterwards. They constantly insisted that me and Laura stay with them, and what I first thought to be time to bond with her turned out to be one of their many attempts to ruin my relationship with my girlfriend. They were so jaggy and critical of Laura, the way she talked, the way she acted when she glanced at boys and when she didn't, the way she ate, the way she dressed me, and soon enough, even I was starting to get unbearably irritated. I didn't want to pick a fight with my parents as I didn't want to be a bad influence on Laura, but I did speak to them in privacy and asked them to cut off whatever stupid game they were playing, which eventually they did. On the way home from the trip, I could sense that Laura's angst was set to its max. I knew that was the consequences of the poor quality of that trip would influence our relationship going forwards, and probably take the worth out of everything that I had been trying to do. When we got home that day, I immediately shut myself off in a room and called my parents and hailed hell upon them, telling them that if they weren't willing to accept my girlfriend and her daughter, who were now considered my families, I would be happy to exclude them from my life. I'm not sure if our conversation made them feel bad or if they genuinely saw through how disgusting their actions were, but soon after that, they stopped being so judgy of my newly found relationship. A couple of months after, I decided to take Laura on another trip to the same spot to show her the things that are different and that the past trip wasn't because I didn't love her or the destination sucked, but rather because my parents were acting like little shits. I talked to her about it and I noticed that there was some discomfort towards the idea. I told my girlfriend, who is now my fiancée, to talk to her in private and convince her to come with me because I really wanted a second chance at proving to her that I was not willing to become a fatherly figure should she want me to, but because I genuinely think we had always had a good bond since I love her like she was my own. After I came back home from work that day and talked to my fiancée, she was absolutely furious with me. She told me that she had talked to Laura, and she told her that the reason she was so pissed off last time was because I assaulted her and slapped her and locked her in a room without allowing her to go out or have any fun, and she would do anything in the world to not go on a trip with me ever again. My girlfriend, obviously being the amazing mother she is, picked a fight with me, not even trying to be discreet, to prove to Laura that no matter what happens, she would always be on her side regardless of who the other side might be. Which I appreciate myself, but also I would appreciate a lot more if it was true, because I would never do anything remotely close to that to a person I hate, let alone someone that I was willing to father and take as my own. I swore to her up and down that I hadn't done anything to her and explained to her that my parents were the ones acting like a bunch of toddlers and ruined the trip for us, and that I was trying my best to make it enjoyable and memorable, but for its good or not for its bad, she hasn't really let me off the hook, and I'm trying to be respectful of their emotions and whatnot, but I really don't know how to make her believe me. Update. I flew my parents in after the last post, basically dragging them out from their ears to get them to talk to my fiancé and tell her that they were the ones that actually ruined the trip for her and not that I had assaulted her. I guess the gravity of the accusations, as well as the fact that they were acting horribly, made them sound extra sincere, on top of the fact that they would never ever confess to something they didn't do. My fiancé ended up forgiving me, but man, does it sting to be accused of something so bad that you didn't or would never do. I apologized to Lara and promised her that I would never let anything like that happen again, and should she tell me if she doesn't want to do anything, and I will listen to her instead of having to lie about it or accuse me of something so serious. I didn't scold her, and I tried to be as gentle as I could while informing her of how distraught her accusations made me. But at the end of the day, something as serious as that can only be said so nicely. I haven't asked Laura to go with me on any trips ever since, and I'm waiting for her to feel comfortable enough to either bring up the topic or ask me herself. But I really do miss all the fun that we used to have, and I wish that none of this had happened. But I also can't help but feel genuine horror when I think of what could have happened to my relationship as well as my reputation had I not been able to prove that I didn't lay a hand, nor assault, or God forbid, abuse Laura. Next story. My sister, 45, and I, 42 female, grew up with absent parents. They were successful doctors and honestly did not have time for us. My sister followed in their footsteps. I married at 22 after attending a very small culinary school and decided to be a housewife. My parents and sister do not like my husband because I spent what was left of my trust paying off his student loans and buying our home. My sister had a kid when she was 30, ended up being a single mom who is also a doctor. My husband and I stepped up and took over most of his care because I did not want him to grow up like I did. He calls me Mama, and he calls my husband Papa. He also mainly lives with us and only goes home once or twice a week. We also have guardianship over him. My sister knows and does not mind. Like I said, very busy and successful. We were at my parents for Christmas. They started throwing shade at me for not being a doctor like them, and at my husband because of the aforementioned reason. We're used to it and decided years ago that we don't care since we rarely see them and they're great with the kids. I guess my nephew took offense and he just went off on his grandparents and his mom. Some harsh truths were spoken and he ended up telling my sister that he views her as an absent aunt and not his mom. That me and dear husband are all the parents he needs and wants. He was so upset and tempers were flaring, so we took him and our kids and went home. I tried contacting my sister to tell her that I put him in therapy and that she should attend to try and fix their relationship, but she didn't answer. It was until yesterday that she called me drunk and said that I was so jealous of her that I stole her kid and ruined their relationship. I didn't reply and just hung up on her and sent her a text with all the relevant information about the therapist and schedule so she could attend if she wanted to. But I'm feeling so guilty. I never tried to steal her kid. She really loves him. All I did was try to be there for him so he doesn't have the same childhood I did. So, am I the a-hole? Edit. My sister actually helps financially. She takes him shopping and on a yearly vacation and stuff like that. Sorry I didn't mention it because I honestly thought it was implied. Thank you, fellow Redditor who pointed it out. Not the a-hole. Parents who choose their career over kids need to face the hard truth that the kid is going to be one who is hurt the most and needs someone who is there to raise them, not just someone who provides financially what they make at their job. It is possible to have both a career and be there as a parent, but don't expect that to just fall into place if you're willing to work at one and not the other. Being a parent takes a lot of work too, so don't expect a kid to not notice you aren't there for them. You guys did the right thing by being there for a kid who didn't have parents who weren't willing to parent him. Not the a-hole. She really loves him. The only love she has shown him is allowing you and your husband to take care of him. You did not steal her son, she gave him away. Her career was more important than her child. In doing so, she ruined their relationship. You have nothing to feel guilty about. You have and continue to give him a wonderful childhood. However, I have to ask, why does he need therapy? He sounds absolutely well-adjusted. Are you trying to tell him how he feels is wrong and therefore something is wrong with him? No. The person who needs therapy is your sister to deal with the fact that she pushed her son away and now must deal with the fallout. Absolutely not the a-hole. You stepped up and made sure that your sister's kid had a life that you and your sister didn't get. Massive kudos to you for being there for him while his bio mom pursued her career. It sounds like he recognizes how much slack you and your husband have picked up for him, and he sees his bio mom as someone who values her career more than her son. It's understandable that listening to you guys be insulted by your parents really bothered him. He's obviously very aware that his mom would rather be a doctor than be a parent, and your parents were basically judging you guys for not choosing the same path. It's clear he's really thankful for you guys, and I'm sorry, but your sister has no business crying foul. She has benefited from this situation and has been able to pursue her career knowing full well someone else would be raising her kid. Now she wants to act upset and offended when her son calls her out for her actions. She has no business making you feel any kind of guilt. She chose her life and she doesn't get to blame that on you, so don't let her. You and your husband are saints, and I'm so glad you guys stepped up to raise that kid. Your sister and parents are total a-holes. Next story. My 33 female, brother 30 male, and his fiancée 28 female are getting married in a week. My brother decided this last week. I'm happy. I think his fiancée is great. I spoke to her about the wedding and she told me that it was going to be small and they weren't going to do dinner after. I understood wanting it small because she's pregnant and COVID. But then my mom took over. She started inviting people and planning a reception, and my brother went along with it. His fiancée was upset and stressed but didn't want to argue. So yesterday, my mom called me at work while my brother was on the phone saying they want me to be a bridesmaid. I said, sure, as long as I don't have to wear a dress. My brother says I have to wear a dress. Work is busy and I can't focus, so I tell them I'll call them back. That morning, I text my future sister-in-law and tell them that I'm happy for them, but I'd rather not be a bridesmaid because I've spent a long time trying to be comfortable in my skin and who I am and what I like to wear. I decided to come, but not to the wedding, and I hope she's not mad. She texts me back and says no, she's not mad, and that I shouldn't have even thought she was. Around the same time, my brother calls me and tells me he really wants me to be a bridesmaid. It's only 45 minutes and I can change after. I told him I talked to his fiancée and that she was okay and wasn't mad. He then gets upset and says he's going to talk to her and tell her not to interfere with his wedding. A few minutes later, she calls to say she doesn't want to plan because stress wasn't good for the baby. Then my brother calls me and I tell him that it's her wedding too. And then he brings up my wife, 23 female, into the situation, saying she is making decisions for me, and she doesn't need to be at the wedding if she can't be respectful. I tell him he's wrong and she has nothing to do with my decision. He keeps bringing her up. Finally, she gets upset and yells through the phone, fine, she won't come. My brother keeps arguing and saying I'm the only sibling he has left, so I've got to do this because he asked mom if I would. Our other sibling passed away in the middle of last year. I said if I have to wear a dress, no. So then he tells my mom and my mom calls me, talking about how I'm selfish and a disappointment. She calls again and I ignore this call. Then she sends a text in the family chat, saying I'm an evil person and effective immediately. My aunts, cousins, niece, nephew, and my grandma have to block me because instead of being a good daughter, I'm defending trash, referring to my wife, against the family, and I'm no longer a part of the family. My brother then sends texts talking about how it's my wife's fault that he feels like he lost another sibling and all I had to do was wear a dress for the wedding ceremony and pictures, then I could dress how I wanted at the reception. My mom says I'm not allowed to speak to any of my family. Am I the a-hole for refusing to wear a dress for my brother's wedding? Edited to add. Info, I don't wear female clothes and my family has always had an issue with the way I dress. Things like this have happened before. I've worn what they've wanted, being assured that I could change into what makes me more comfortable, only to be pressured and guilted into not changing or ruining the rest of the pictures. I offered compromises. I offered to wear a matching suit color to match. Initially, it was only supposed to be my sister-in-law's sister standing behind her, but my mom got involved. Not the a-hole and your brother needs to grow up here. From what you've said about your future sister-in-law, she is not comfortable with a large wedding and your brother has chosen to ignore that and has allowed your mother to take control. His wedding, it's their wedding, and sister-in-law is correct about the stress not being good for the baby or her. Good luck. Not the a-hole, holy shit. That is some misogynistic, homophobic bullshit, and I'm worried for your future sister-in-law's safety. Like maybe take her out for lunch and check on her because her fiancé is mad at her for interfering in her own wedding party. What the F? This is not how a healthy and supportive family functions. Next story. My mom gifted me our childhood home when I got married. She has lived with us since the pandemic started. I have a stepdaughter, she's 8. Her mom is not in her life and we're planning on adopting her after things settle down. My mom was great with my daughter and my daughter calls her grandma. I thought their affections were mutual. My younger daughter is 3 months old. My mother spends more time with the baby and that wouldn't have been a problem if she didn't completely cut out my stepdaughter and I have caught her calling the baby her eldest grandchild. I tried talking to mom about it, but she was defensive. My daughter had started to pick on the fact that her grandma was not interested in her anymore. I could see that it was only going to get worse as they got older. I tried to talk to her again, but she told me that I had to accept the fact that my side of the family will be closer to my biological daughter than my stepdaughter. I cannot accept that, and I told her that if that was the case, then she needed to move out and I called my sister and she was willing to take in mom. She moved out about a week ago and she was distant and cold with me. My sister thinks I should have given her more time to adjust to the new situation, and I was depriving my daughter of an amazing grandmother. I feel guilty because she gifted me this house. She has done a lot for me and I feel I was out of line with her. I really loved having her stay with us, but I really couldn't have my daughter be a second-class citizen in her own home. Not the a-hole. You said it yourself. Your daughter, step or otherwise, can't be seen as a second-class citizen in her own home. Your mother doesn't seem to be able to understand that. Your first duty is always to your kids. I think you've done the right thing. Not the a-hole. You protected your stepdaughter from being neglected and potentially developed attachment abandonment disorders resulting from that. Plus, she will remember that you stood up for her and will definitely appreciate that when she's older. You did good, mama.